Shalom and welcome back to Cooler Heads. It has been a few weeks, maybe a few months since we met, but we are glad to be back. I am Scott Hausman Weiss, Rabbi Scott Hausman Weiss of Congregation Shema Kulenu. And I am joined by George Schwartz, who is a congregant and supporter of Congregation Shema Kulenu, also an Army veteran and a good friend. And we have decided that we wanted to, reconvene to have a conversation about some really serious issues that have come up of late.
Yeah, so over the weekend we got together with Heights Kibbutz and some congregants of Shema Kolenu and some other interested members of the tribe,
Right.
and we did a shooting training event where we learned about some firearms and how to properly handle them and safely use them. Jewish self-defense has been, you know, people have become more interested in it for some kind of obvious reasons.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Um, yeah, exactly. One kind of sad note is just as we left the event and we were all just kind of smiles and slapping each other on the back at what a wonderful time we all had. That's when the news broke about that horrific terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado.
Right.
So we'll discuss the Boulder incident later on in the episode, but Rabbi, I wanted to get some kind of feedback from the congregation about how GI Jews went. That's the event. That's the name that we gave to the event. GI
Yeah.
Jews. What's the word on the street?
So the word on the street, I'm not sure there is a word on the street, but the folks who participated were thrilled. I mean, they really enjoyed it. I think they really enjoyed the camaraderie. They enjoyed the opportunity to really, learn from people who really know what they're talking about. And one of my goals with this event was to bring young adults together, but also I have a deep appreciation and respect for arms. I'm not a gun user by any stretch of the imagination. I've shot guns before, but it's not been something that I've done on a regular basis. But I think I mentioned it on Sunday when I spoke to the group. I quote my mom often when I remember my mom would always say when we were in cold weather, she would say, you have to respect the weather. You have to dress for the weather. You have to respect it, right? Because it's not going to change, right? I mean, it might change, but it's not going to change necessarily the way you want it to change. And so you got to prepare for it, right? You got to have the
It's
right
not going to
clothing.
change based by your force of will either. It's
It's
not going to
certainly not
change
going to change
what you
because of
want
my
it
force
to.
of will. Exactly. Unless I go inside to get hot chocolate, then that my weather then my weather changes, right? But for me, the same is true for so many other things in life, particularly, guns. Um, Guns are something that, for some people, they inspire tremendous confidence, a sense of heroism, a sense of strength. There's a lot of people for whom guns, the notion of guns, um, brings up in them fear, concern, and quite a bit of criticism. To me, things that are just in existence and they're not going away, it's so much better for us to learn to respect them, understand them, be around them. We don't have to be an expert. I don't have to be able to take apart and put back together a, I don't know, revolver or whatever, but which I can tell you right now it's probably not going to happen.
Bit of a parlor trick anyway. Don't I
Yeah, is
wouldn't worry
it?
about that.
Okay. All right. But the ability to understand the impact, well, I can talk about that more later, but so it was interesting because I did get a little bit of correspondence via email from a few folks. Um, Mostly were a little bit shocked, a little bit dismayed, a little bit put off by the GI Jews name, right? And I think it was made a little more complicated because it followed the Capitol Museum murders. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that the name of it was chosen weeks before, but that the cause, the importance of it was maybe all the more so. The ability to bring people together to get a sense of the power of these instruments.
Yeah, that's really well said. Like, me personally, I'm really not a gun nut. I Guns are an integral part of my profession in during my military service. I regard guns as tools, and
Yeah,
so I have a tool for jobs that I need tools for. I don't just have a huge armory of guns, and I don't attach my self-worth to like the guns that I have in the way that some of the more atrocious elements of gun culture do. For the people who were critical of the GI Jews
yeah.
events, I would say, first of all, we're changing the name to Lox and Loaded, so you don't need to worry about the GI Jews thing if that's putting you off. Second, I would encourage those people to come out to
Yeah,
our events because a lot of these people, I'm sure, are big fans of gun control. Nothing wrong with that. I think that as a country, we've all decided that we do need some level of gun control, right? I mean,
absolutely.
no serious person is arguing like, oh, I should be able to have an automatic grenade launcher. I should be able to have an artillery piece in the front lawn. No, that's
Right.
insane. So we know that we need to regulate and control guns in some way. The question is just how much. People fall on different ends of that continuum.
Yeah.
So for the people who want to see guns more controlled, I would say like come out to Locks and Loaded. Come see how responsible gun owners do it. Maybe learn something about the firearms that you're voting on.
Right.
Um, then we'll all be better off. We'll have a more informed electorate.
George, that to me is one of the most important things that I've experienced in the few times that I've had the opportunity uh, to, to shoot weapons. The people I've gone with, the people who run the establishments, they couldn't be more serious. And that's the piece that I think is so crucial is that I think that too often society sort of paints, like this image of people who are gun owners to be just these crazy, I don't know, alligator wrestlers who are in the backwoods of Louisiana or something like that. But it's not that. I mean, there may be people like that, but it's not. That's not. It's the seriousness. The equipment you need, the safety precautions. And it's like clearly, the more you understand the power of these weapons, the more careful you have to be. And then, of course, when you're the one responsible, when you're saying, yes, I will make sure that you're not hurt, right? I'll make sure that you're safe. I mean, there's just, it's a one-time mistake, right? If you make a bad mistake, there's there's no going back in certain
Your
cases.
life is, yeah, your life may be over and somebody else's maybe as well.
Exactly.
So
So, George, let
yeah,
me ask you because we're talking about guns, but part of the reason why, part of the reason why this issue is becoming that much more, in Hebrew, we call it harif, spicy. Like if you're in Israel and you want something spicy, you ask for some harif. So, what's making this time particularly more spicy, of course, is the murders of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, a young couple, one who was Jewish, one who was Christian. They were big supporters of Israel, but the truth is, they weren't killed because of their support for Israel. They weren't killed because they were both Jewish, because they weren't. They were killed because they were in proximity of a Jewish event, not an Israel event, a Jewish.
Josh Shapiro as well.
And
Like,
Josh Shapiro, the governor
yep,
of Pennsylvania, right?
yeah,
Whose home was firebombed. I
yep,
mean, so there's right just last month during Passover.
yep.
And then, of course, what happened in Boulder this
Mm.
past Sunday. So just to remind people so in Boulder, Run for Their Lives is an organization that's around the country, and it's mostly made up of Israelis, Israeli expats, who have been gathering together in quiet protest to remind the world about the hostages. And this crazy man, truly crazy man. I'm going to diagnose him now. Crazy man, just reeling, yelling, screaming, and he creates a improvised blowtorch or flamethrower, right? And I mean, at least one of them has died, and the second one may. I mean, it's just atrocious and awful. But the thing is, this is not a surprise. My blog post from last week, I started out with saying about the murders in DC. It's not a surprise, right? I have spoken to people about the rhetoric. Call it, there's somebody I knew who was wanted to hold up a sign that said, stop the Zionist genocide. And I said to this person, please don't carry that. Please don't put it up because you are putting me and my family in danger. So we're living in this really, really fraught environment. It is very frightening. What I wanted to ask, that's sort of all preamble to ask you, George, as a professional uh, soldier, as a professional defender of our country, and with lots of experience in that realm, um, what's the most important thing? Because not everybody's going to go out and buy guns. Not everybody's going to go out and go and get training. But what's the most important thing you could recommend to people when they're thinking about their own defense?
Well, I'm glad that you said not everybody's going to go out and buy guns because I do not recommend everybody to go out and buy a gun. That is not the single most important thing that you can do if you're interested in self-defense. I would say the most important thing that you can do for self-defense is really, first of all, be in shape, go to the gym, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Second, find a martial art that speaks to you. The actual martial art discipline, which one it is, does not matter as much as the consistency. It should be something you enjoy, something that you do twice per week and come away feeling like you got something out of it. There was a video that circulated 2 or 3 years ago about there was a young lady who was working out in the gym of her apartment building when she helped a man, a stranger that she just assumed was a member of lived in the apartment building. She helped him into the gym and he assaulted her there. Uh, Horrible thing, but she fought back everything she had and she him off and chased him out the door. If you watch that video, you can see as they're rolling around on the ground, neither one of these people has any idea what they're doing in a fight.
Mm.
But what it came down to was she had the will to win. She was determined to prevail and not be a victim. And that combined with her physical fitness was enough to fight this man off and not become another victim. I can think of some women that I've sparred with in jiu-jitsu who, if this guy had been unfortunate enough to attack one of them, he would not have walked away under his own power. So I would say the single most important thing that you can do is to be in shape and find a martial art that speaks to you, um, just for the sake of preparedness, so that if an emergency comes, it's not a moment of panic. It's a moment that you are prepared for, if you haven't planned for it, if that makes sense.
It could make so much sense.
I'd say,
I'm so glad you mentioned about physical fitness. You know, that piece of it speaks so much to, you know, this is going to sound, I think there's so much of our lives that we don't spend preparing for things that could go wrong is somewhat of a privilege, right? There's a lot of people in the world who have had to come to expect that there's bad stuff coming around the bend and that they have to be prepared.
oh,
And
oh yeah.
there's these two notions in Jewish tradition that I think are really important to bring up now. So pikuach nefesh is term which means literally saving the soul. But it is a term in Jewish law that is used for for people to understand the importance, the crucial importance of saving a life. So pikuach nefesh becomes the rationale for breaking Shabbat if you're a traditional Jew, and driving somebody to the hospital, right? Jewish law is very clear. If somebody needs to get to the hospital and they can only get by means of driving, you cannot, not you shouldn't, you cannot say, "Oh, I can't drive because it's the Sabbath," right? So, but there's also this notion of pikuach nefesh being you got to take care of yourself. You got to save your soul to the best of your ability. The other idea that I think is really important to mention in this context is the context of the concept of the rodef. So in the Torah, the rodef means the pursuer. And the notion is this: if someone witnesses someone else being pursued, then they can step up and use lethal force, even to stop the pursuer, and it is understood as self-defense because you literally have gotten in the way of someone becoming being mortally wounded. So those two notions of pikuach nefesh, saving the soul, and the Torah's notion of the rodef, that not only can you, but you do have an obligation to save a life and also end one if that life is threatening your life or someone else's.
So regarding the subject of the rodef,
Yeah.
undoubtedly the police officers who were present in Boulder had some kind of rules of engagement that covered them in if they had to intervene with deadly force in case those protesters were attacked. And now I've participated in a number of run for their lives events in Houston, as you have as well. Like I've seen you there. And the Houston police has had an excellent presence for us. They've done an excellent job of having a show of force there present to protect us. But Run for Their Lives has always been very adamant about none of the demonstrators on our side bringing weapons,
Mm-hmm.
which is important to note. Um, and it's part of being a responsible gun owner to respect the rules of those around you.
Right.
If if you have a license to carry concealed, it's your duty to know the law. And there are certain establishments where you cannot carry your weapon concealed, cannot carry it openly, or cannot carry it at all, and you must respect that. So I do not I will not criticize Run for Their Lives for not authorizing weapons at their events. I think that once you do take that step to authorize weapons, you have undertaken a lot of responsibility and a lot of liability that peaceful demonstrators really shouldn't have to undertake. There's just too much risk of either turning into a militia or a mob, which is even worse. So, if you plan to come out to one of these demonstrations, I would say just respect the rules, be a peaceful demonstrator along with the rest of them,
Sure.
and we ought to rely on our law enforcement to respect the law of the road death and protect us. When the moment comes that we can no longer rely on that, then we've lost our country.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm so, I've commented before that in my professional life, I've been a rabbi in Alabama and Texas. As a boy from California, that wasn't exactly what I had in mind. If someone had asked me, cultures of Alabama and Texas are just different than California and Colorado. There's no question. And I'm not trying to even make a qualitative comparison. I do think, I didn't give it a lot of thought. And I mean, I knew that I felt much more comfortable. I feel much more comfortable at the Run for Their Lives demonstrations because there are four police cars and the policemen are wearing bulletproof vests and they're standing by and they understand why they're there. They get it. And I learned that this past Sunday, I think I'm assuming in the wake of the Capitol Museum murders, there were 14 police cars at the Run for Their Lives
Hmm.
demonstration this past Sunday. To hear that in Boulder, the folks there had never had police security, and that when they asked after the Capitol Museum murders, they asked for police protection, literally before this past Sunday, before this guy brought this flamethrower. The
Gosh,
police told them that they said we believe we have enough coverage in the area. And that's the piece that nobody likes being paranoid, and no one likes being right when they've been paranoid, right? If I'm paranoid, I want to be
yeah,
proven wrong every time.
yeah,
But seeing the way this man acted with full ability, with freedom, screaming and yelling at these people, we need to be at a point where we in the Jewish community recognize, I'm going to go so far as to say, it is malpractice for us to be holding any events without armed security.
that's probably accurate, and it's really sad that it has come to this. But I I am going to preach this till I'm blue in the face to anyone who will listen. Helplessness is not a viable survival strategy for us. It's not.
Right. It never has been.
It never has been.
Right.
Helplessness did not elicit any mercy from the Cossacks in
Yeah.
the Pale of Settlement.
Right. Amen to
Helplessness,
that.
not what helped the kibbutzim survive during the War of Independence. Helplessness did not do anything to prevent the Shoah or stop it in progress. And it's not going to do anything to help us here.
No.
Like we have to take our self-defense seriously, both as individuals and as a Jewish community.
Yeah, that's the piece that I think is so crucial. Israel is this fundamental example, the proof in the pudding, right? I don't believe that a Holocaust can happen again as long as there is an Israel, right? Israel is that proof in the pudding. Now, we know what happened on October 7th, but we also know what's been happening since October 8th, or at least since October 20 something, right? Israel has punished Hamas and on six other fronts.
Yeah,
It is still a tremendous struggle. It is still a tremendously difficult and challenging and tragic situation. But that old saying of well, what would happen? If the Jews laid down their weapons,
no more
no
Israel.
more Israel. That's
But
okay for the Jews.
if Hamas laid down their arms,
There'd be
no more
peace.
war.
Right. No more war. Exactly. Exactly. That's such a crucial piece.
So, a question for
Yeah.
you, Rabbi. So, I know that you're in touch with a lot of other faith leaders in the Houston community and outside of it. What are the leaders of other religious communities, like the Hindus, the Muslims, saying about the brutal attack in Boulder, Colorado?
So it depends on who you're talking about. Um, but I mean, I think there's some bright spots in the midst of a lot of silence. I mean, the good news is that, I saw a recent, there's a Muslim organization called ING that is in partnership with the ADL, and they put out a very solid, clear statement that said, this is completely unacceptable after Boulder and after DC. This is completely unacceptable with no excuses, with no with no except in the case of or except none of that. It was very clear, and I appreciated that. Um,
Absolutely.
I don't I think that the rhetoric right now is so disruptive of the truth that there's still this, context thing, right? And there are plenty of people. I mean, it was outrageous to me to see some of the stuff that was shared with me on Instagram and TikTok, and these millennials who are coming online and making the claim that not only should you understand this in the context, but they were right. These actions were right and they were just. So that those pieces. So what I believe the part of the reason why I'm not hearing, honestly, and I didn't say I'm not hearing from many interfaith leaders, um, is because number one, they don't really they don't know what to say. They don't understand. They don't understand what it means to have a significant, you know, budget line for security in your religious organization's budget. Um, and then there's this broader piece of there are so many people who have bought into this completely backwards point of view that essentially frames the notion that Israel is unlike every other actor in the world. Israel stands out, which I believe it is, but not in this way,
Yeah.
right? But how it is that there's nothing said about what Russia's doing in Ukraine, or what the Chinese did against the Uyghurs, or what Assad did to his own people,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, the using gas
Yeah.
to cause the not just the deaths but the suffering. I mean, the list can go on and on, right? I mean, for me, one of my favorite questions is how many people do you not favorite in quotes how many Gazan citizens, Gazan people, um, have been allowed into the underground tunnels by Hamas to take refuge? Exactly
Zero.
zero, right? The proof is clear. So I guess my answer to your question is I believe that the rhetoric is so cloudy, clouding, I should say,
Yeah.
that a lot of people are stuck in the mud of context.
That's really disappointing. I mean, certain things should really be just so blindingly obvious that it requires no context.
Yeah,
Even I would say once you have the full context, that really just makes the Palestinians starting this war in Gaza like even more horrific. Now, this kind of leads me to another question, kind of the paradox of Palestinian violence that was pointed out by the author of, oh, I believe the title is Liberal Democracies and Terrorism, or Liberal Societies and Terrorism, something like that. A book came out in 2003. And he pointed out that the paradox is the more horrific the act of Palestinian violence, the more sympathy it draws for the Palestinian cause. Like the assumption seems to be like, oh, because they did this horrible thing, their suffering must be like
right, right,
commensurately horrible. That must be why they've done this horrible thing,
right.
not because they're evil, but because they are just so oppressed.
Hmm.
I believe that the attack in Colorado is going to be a turning point in some way, whether it's to like everyone recoiling in horror at this event or our enemies leaning into it and seeking inspiration from it. Which way do you see this going?
I don't know if it's a watershed or if it's a going to be another, unfortunately, another tick in the
Mm,
in the tape.
mm.
Um,
That's
I'm
more horrific in its own way. That is
yeah,
just like put this in the bin of anti-Semitic violence that's rising in America today.
because it's this these experiences that I've had with individuals who are trying. Look, I think that most people have understood me to be a pretty liberal-minded rabbi. I haven't been a rabbi who's been only about tikkun olam, saving the world, repairing the world, all that, although I do believe strongly in God's mandate to the Jewish people that your job is to be a partner with me, God, in fixing the world. I firmly believe that that is what God is calling us to. But I also very much believe in Rabbi Hillel's statement, which he says, he asks three questions. He asks, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Level one, you got to make sure that you are safe, that your family is safe, that because there's nobody else who's going to do it if you're not. Then, if I am only for myself, what am I? He asks. Not who am I? He asks, what am I? Meaning, if I'm only for myself, I'm a real schmuck.
Yeah,
I mean, you cannot be a human being, a good human being, and ignore the suffering of others.
correct.
And then finally he asks, Amatai, and if not now, when? Right? And those three questions are such crucial pieces for what it means to be part, of the Jewish world and to have a sense of responsibility towards the Jewish world. Um, and so people have got to recognize. I mean, I'm so sick of saying this, like I'm blue in the face about it. And so I can say it all day long. They're not necessarily listening to me, but evil words, violent words does lead to, has a better chance of leading to violent deeds than not. And so here's where I'm stuck because I understand the crucial import of freedom of speech.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I believe it was absolutely correct in Skokie, Illinois, when the Nazis were allowed to march. Right? I think that it is really a slippery slope when you start deciding whose speech can be regulated and whose speech can't. But,
Yeah, I'll admit that's a quandary for me as well. Is
but
I'm
here's the
also
thing. Here's the
yeah,
thing. Freedom of speech doesn't obviate responsibility for actions that are taken in the name of your words,
that is true.
right? So you're free to say it, you're free to have it on a sign, but don't pretend that because you're free to say it doesn't mean that you're not impacting potentially real violence.
The sad thing is, I think that most of those people waving those signs would be proud of that. I
They say
mean,
they are.
yeah, yeah, the Democratic Socialists of America, and let me note that our podcast is completely nonpartisan.
Absolutely.
We do not take sides politically, but I would be remiss if I did not point out the Democratic Socialists of America encountered an existential crisis after the murders of Yaron and Sarah about whether or not they should condemn these murders or not.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It felt to me
Um,
like the same question, it was the same kind of question that the presidents of Harvard and Yale and Columbia couldn't answer.
yes.
Is it necessarily against your rules to call for the genocide of fellow students?
What was so horrific about those answers, and I think what the whole country kind of recoiled at, was that these universities were known for having some of the most repressive speech codes of any institute of
Right.
higher learning in the country. They, the former President Claudine Gay had a zero tolerance policy for fat phobia, whatever that is, but she didn't have the moral fortitude to say that calling for the genocide of Jews is not okay. I think that that just displayed the moral rot on display in these allegedly elite universities.
It's hard to see it another way. You want to believe that people, at the end of the day, they understand right and wrong. And I, look, as a Jewish leader, I don't want to end up at anti-Semitism. Like that, I know for some people it can get old, right? Or it can feel like it's just an excuse or whatever. But when you've ruled out every other possible rationale, in a world when I said this before, when groups supporting LGBTQ identity are aligning with Hamas, you feel like I feel like somebody's got to step, like, okay, we've stepped outside of anything that makes sense,
Yes.
right? I mean, we can't possibly be operating within a sense of reality, in a sense of so. Well, George, I am so glad we got back together. That doesn't sound right, but we got back together to discuss these things. Um, I want to encourage anybody who's listening that this Sunday at 6 o'clock, Run for Their Lives is going to be gathering on the Montrose Bridge. It's the bridge over 59. There will be plenty of police security. We're there for about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and we're just there waving Israeli flags, holding up posters, remembering the hostages,
And
and
American flags too.
American flags. Yes, thank you. And American flags. And I encourage people to come out. It is very safe. And to have a really large number of folks, especially in this next week, would be really important. And lastly, I am the rabbi of Congregation Shema Kolenu, and I wanted to let anybody know if they're listening or watching this that we are a congregation without walls, membership, and dues, and we are open to everybody. Tomorrow night, we will be holding our services, not tomorrow night, excuse me, Friday. Well, it doesn't really matter for the video. This Friday night, June 6th, we will be celebrating Shabbat at First Unitarian Universalist, which is on Fannin Street at the corner of Fannin and Oakdale. I encourage you to be there. 6 o'clock, Oneg, 6:30 service. It'll be beautiful. Please join us. As we say, join us. You already belong. And George, you want to say bye?
Well, I absolutely would. I plan to be at both Shabbat services and the Run for Their
Oh,
Lives
there we
event
go.
on Sunday. And I'd like to put in one last plug for anyone who is interested in taking a more active role in defending themselves and defending their community, to do what you can on your own by going to the gym, taking first aid classes, practicing a martial art, and come out to Lox and Loaded when you're ready for it and you want to see what we're all about. Uh, Keep your ear to the ground through Shema Kolenu, through Heights Kibbutz, and through Hey Houston, and I hope to see you at one of these events. Thanks for
Excellent.
joining us on Cooler Heads. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks a lot, George. Be well.
You too, Rabbi.